The woman tried to sell herself for a prosthetic, but a cowboy arrived to save her life. Maria had always been a lively and independent woman, full of energy and hope. She grew up in a small rural town surrounded by fields and mountains, where life was simple but hard. From a young age, she learned that nothing in life came easily. Her parents had worked tirelessly to provide for the family, and Maria had always admired their determination. She carried that same spirit within her, believing that no challenge was too big if she faced it with courage. In her early 20s, Maria had a job at a local factory. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough to cover her small apartment and modest needs. She loved the independence it gave her, the sense that she could handle her life on her own. She had dreams, small but bright dreams, like traveling to the nearby city to see a play, or one day saving enough to buy a small cottage where she could live peacefully. Life seemed ordinary, but Maria enjoyed ordinary. She felt comfortable in her routine, finding joy in small moments, sharing a laugh with coworkers, walking through the town square in the evenings, and feeling the wind on her face as she ran errands. Then, everything changed in a single instant. One morning as Maria was working on the factory floor, a sudden accident occurred. A piece of machinery malfunctioned, and she lost her balance at the worst possible moment. Before anyone could react, she had fallen, and the accident was severe. Emergency workers arrived quickly, but the damage had been done. Maria's leg was badly injured, and the doctors had no choice. They had to amputate. The days that followed were a blur of pain, confusion, and fear. Maria woke up in the hospital bandaged and weak, feeling a strange emptiness where her leg had been. She tried to move, but the absence of her leg made her feel unsteady and helpless. The reality of what had happened hit her slowly, like a cold wave washing over her. She had always thought of herself as strong, but suddenly she felt fragile, vulnerable, and alone. Her friends and neighbors visited at first, offering support and kind words. But as the weeks passed, many returned to their own lives, and Maria began to feel isolated. Her apartment suddenly felt too large and empty, and the simple tasks she had once taken for granted, walking to the store, cooking a meal, cleaning her home, became enormous challenges. She found herself sitting for hours, staring at the walls, thinking about what her life had become. The financial burden only made things worse. Hospital bills piled up faster than she could pay, and even after discharge, she needed expensive care and medical supplies. She knew that getting a prosthetic leg could restore some of her independence, but the cost was far beyond what she could afford. Maria's savings, already limited, were quickly disappearing. Each day that passed without a solution felt heavier than the last. She began to feel trapped in her own life, caught between despair and the faint hope that somehow things might improve. Maria struggled with the emotional toll as much as the physical pain. Nights were the hardest. She lay in bed, thinking of all the dreams she had once held, and feeling that they were slipping away. She wondered if she would ever walk again, if she could ever return to a life where she felt in control. The loneliness pressed down on her like a weight she could not lift. She felt guilty for feeling hopeless, yet she could not shake the fear that her life would never be the same. Despite the darkness, Maria's mind occasionally wandered to memories of better times. She remembered her childhood, running through fields barefoot, laughing with friends under the sun. She recalled the joy of small accomplishments, like saving enough money to buy a book she wanted, or helping her mother bake bread. These memories were bittersweet. They reminded her of what she had lost, but also of the strength she still possessed. Somewhere deep inside, Maria knew she was not completely broken. Her desperation grew as the days went on. She tried to think of every possible way to get a prosthetic leg legally and safely, but each option seemed impossible. Government assistance programs were slow, charity organizations had long waiting lists, and her savings were almost gone. She began to feel that time was slipping through her fingers, and that every day she remained without a prosthetic was another day she lost a piece of her independence and dignity. The small town itself offered little hope. While people were kind in casual ways, resources for someone in Maria's situation were scarce. She could see other residents going about their lives, walking freely, living fully, and she could not help but feel left behind. It was not just physical mobility she missed. It was the sense of freedom, the ability to participate in life fully, and the simple joy of doing ordinary things without fear or limitation. One evening, Maria sat by her small window, looking out at the sunset over the mountains. The sky was a brilliant mix of oranges and pinks, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe and remember the beauty of the world. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the loneliness and desperation returned. She realized that hope, while still flickering, was growing dim. The thought crossed her mind that perhaps she had no choice left, that maybe she would have to give up something she never imagined giving up to regain even a fraction of her old life. Maria knew she faced a critical decision. She had always prided herself on her strength and independence, yet now she felt powerless. She had spent her life working hard, saving carefully, and taking care of herself. And yet here she was, at a crossroads where none of her efforts seemed to matter. Her heart ached not only for the pain she endured, but for the future she feared she would never have. And so Maria began to consider options she had once thought impossible. She began to imagine ways she could get the prosthetic leg she so desperately needed, even if it meant risking her safety or dignity. Each idea filled her with fear, yet she could not ignore the rising tide of desperation. Her mind became a battlefield, torn between hope for independence and the fear of making a choice she might regret. But even in her darkest moments, there was a small spark within her. A part of Maria refused to give up completely, even if she did not yet know how to overcome the obstacles before her. She knew she needed help, she knew she needed guidance, and she knew that somehow someone might appear who could change the course of her life. She could not see it yet, but deep down, Maria felt that life had one more chance for her, one more twist of fate that could save her from the path she feared she might take. And so, with trembling hands and a heavy heart, Maria prepared herself for the unknown. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that she could not remain in the same state of despair forever. Something, or someone, was coming. She could feel it, even if she could not yet see it. And in that quiet room, filled with shadows and fading sunlight, Maria waited, unsure of what was ahead, yet unwilling to let go entirely of the life she dreamed of reclaiming. Days passed after Maria's accident, each one heavier than the last. The small apartment that once felt like her safe place now seemed like a cage. She sat near the window, staring out at the quiet streets, watching people move freely while she felt trapped in her own body. Each time someone walked past her window, it reminded her of what she had lost: the freedom to walk, to explore, to live a life without constant pain and limitation. Her thoughts were constantly consumed by the prosthetic leg she desperately needed. Without it, even small tasks became enormous challenges. Carrying groceries from the store, navigating the uneven paths in her town, and even getting dressed in the morning required a level of effort that left her exhausted. The simplest moments once taken for granted now reminded her of her dependence and vulnerability. Maria tried to reach out for help. She visited local clinics, applied for financial assistance programs, and even wrote letters to charitable organizations that provided prosthetics for people in need. Each time she received either a long wait list, complicated forms, or a polite rejection, the world felt like it was closing in, and her patience began to wear thin. With each no, a sense of desperation grew within her. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, Maria stumbled across a discussion forum she had never noticed before. People were talking about underground networks that offered medical help in exchange for extreme personal favors. At first, Maria could hardly believe it. She scrolled through stories, reading the words with a mix of disbelief and horror. People were sharing tales of desperate situations, some claiming that these networks had helped people get medical care when there was no other option. At first, Maria tried to push the idea away. She had always been proud of her independence and dignity. The thought of exchanging her body for a prosthetic felt wrong, dangerous, and shameful. She tried to remind herself that there had to be another way, that someone, somewhere, could help her without asking for something so personal in return. She wanted to believe that. She truly did. But the reality of her situation made it harder to ignore. Each day without the prosthetic made her feel weaker, more isolated, and more hopeless. She could not walk as she once did. She could not cook, clean, or even go outside for fresh air without help. Her small savings were nearly gone, and bills continued to pile up. The world outside continued to move forward, and Maria felt left behind, trapped in a body that refused to cooperate. The more she thought about it, the more the idea started to seem like the only solution. If she could just make it work safely, she could regain her independence, walk again, and rebuild her life. The thought of the prosthetic leg, of being able to move freely, gave her a small spark of hope. But that spark was wrapped in fear and shame. She felt conflicted, torn between the need for survival and the instinct to protect her dignity. As nights passed, Maria began to imagine what it would be like to meet the person offering this help. She rehearsed the meeting in her mind over and over, imagining herself explaining her situation, hoping it could all go safely. She told herself that she would be careful, that she would protect herself no matter what. Still, fear lingered like a shadow, and she often woke in the middle of the night with a racing heart, questioning every decision. Despite the fear, Maria could not escape the pull of necessity. She began researching ways to do it safely. She read stories of others who had survived similar situations and tried to learn from them. She made mental lists of precautions, escape routes, and signals she could use if something went wrong. Each thought made her feel slightly stronger, slightly more in control, even as the situation remained dangerous. During this time, Maria also reflected on her life. She remembered the dreams she had once held, small ambitions that now seemed almost impossible. Owning a little home, traveling, meeting new people, and experiencing the world. All of these dreams had been paused, suspended in time because of the accident. The thought of giving up her safety made her shiver, but the thought of never walking again made her feel paralyzed. She was trapped between fear and necessity. One morning, after another restless night, Maria decided that she had no choice left. She packed a small bag with her essentials, her phone, some cash, and a few personal items. She told herself that she would go only if it seemed safe, only if she felt she could protect herself. Her hands shook as she sipped the bag, but a sense of resolve also filled her heart. She was determined to survive, to regain her independence, and to find a way back to life. As she prepared to leave, Maria noticed the small things she had taken for granted: the sunlight streaming through her window, the sound of birds outside, the familiar creak of her apartment floor. These details reminded her that life was still beautiful, even in moments of despair. She clung to that thought as she walked slowly, carefully, toward a meeting that she hoped would not destroy everything she had left. The streets were quiet as she made her way to the meeting point. She moved cautiously, her bag clutched tightly to her chest. Each step was filled with anxiety, but also with determination. Maria reminded herself that she was not weak, that she had survived worse challenges before, and that she could navigate this situation with intelligence and care. Her mind raced with possible scenarios, escape routes, and warnings she had read online. When she arrived, a shadowed figure waited, and Maria felt a wave of fear wash over her. But before she could step closer, she paused. Something inside her urged her to stop, to reconsider, to look for another way. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear, hope, and anticipation. In that moment, Maria realized she was standing at the edge of a choice that could define the rest of her life. She remembered her parents, her childhood friends, and the simple joy she had once experienced. She thought of her dreams, the small ambitions that had kept her moving forward even when life had been hard. She thought of herself, not just as a woman in need, but as someone who had faced challenges before and had always found a way through. And then, at the very moment when desperation threatened to push her over the edge, something happened. From the distance, a figure appeared, a man on horseback, moving calmly but purposefully toward her. He was dressed like a cowboy, with a wide hat and steady gaze, and something about his presence brought an unexpected sense of safety. Maria felt her heart lift slightly, as if a weight she had carried for weeks had been eased. The cowboy stopped a few steps away, tipping his hat politely. His voice was calm and reassuring, unlike anything she had expected.
"Are you all right?" he asked. "I've heard about what happened to you. I think I can help."
Maria stared, unsure what to say. She had been preparing for danger,
for betrayal, for someone taking advantage of her desperation.
But this man, he seemed different. There was no menace in his voice, no hidden agenda that she could sense. Just kindness, understanding, and a quiet authority that made her feel seen. For the first time in weeks, Maria felt a spark of hope that was not tinged with fear. Maybe, she thought, there was another way. Maybe she did not have to risk her safety, her dignity, or her future to regain what she had lost. Maybe someone genuinely cared. And maybe, just maybe, life had a way of giving second chances when they were needed most. And in that moment, Maria realized that her story was not over. The desperation that had guided her steps so far might soon give way to something better. She did not yet know how. She did not yet know the details. But she felt that the path forward had just begun. And that help, when offered with kindness and honesty, could be the answer she had been waiting for all along. Maria froze in her tracks as the cowboy approached. His presence was calm, yet commanding, and for the first time in days she felt a glimmer of safety. Her heart was still racing, her palms sweaty, but something about him made her hesitate before making the choice she had thought was inevitable. The cowboy dismounted slowly, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. He moved with purpose, but without any sign of threat. His eyes, sharp yet kind, seemed to look right through her fear. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "Whatever you're thinking, it's not your only option." Maria's throat tightened. How could this stranger know? She had carefully hidden her desperation from everyone around her. The underground network, the dangerous meeting, the thought of selling herself. It had been her secret, something she never wanted anyone to know. Yet here he was, reading the situation as if he had been following her life story. I don't know what choice I have," Maria stammered.
I need help. I need a prosthetic."
"I can't live like this anymore." Her voice quivered, carrying the weight of weeks of pain, fear, and isolation. The cowboy nodded, understanding her pain without judgment. "I know," he said, "and you deserve to walk again, to live your life with dignity. But there are safe ways to get what you need. You don't have to risk yourself for this." Maria blinked, unsure whether to believe him. For weeks, she had been trapped in her own despair, convinced that no one could help her, that she had no choice left. Now, this stranger was offering a lifeline she hadn't dared to imagine. His words sounded almost too simple, too good to be true. What do I do then?" she asked softly. Her voice was small, carrying the exhaustion of sleepless nights and endless worry. She wanted to believe him, but fear still clung to her like a shadow.
"I don't know where to start."
The cowboy smiled faintly, as if he had anticipated her doubts.
"First," he said, "you stop.
You step back from whatever you were planning. You don't go through with it. Then, I'll help you find real, safe help. There are people in town, doctors, charities, kind souls, who can give you what you need, but it has to be the right way." Maria hesitated. She had been on the edge for so long that the idea of stepping back felt like a gamble. What if there was no one else? What if this was her last chance? Yet the way he spoke, the calm confidence in his voice, made her pause. She felt a small shift inside, like the first breeze after a storm. "Who are you?" she asked, still wary but curious. "Name's Jake," he replied. "I'm just someone who knows that no one should have to risk themselves out of desperation. I've seen too many people make choices they regret, thinking there was no other way, and I've made it my mission to help when I can." Maria looked at him, taking in the lines on his face, the weathered hat, and the strength in his stance. Somehow he seemed trustworthy. Something about him reminded her that even in the darkest moments, kindness could exist. She felt a flicker of hope, tiny but persistent. Jake waited patiently, giving her the space to process. After a long silence, Maria finally spoke.
I didn't know where else to go. I tried everything.
Nothing worked. And I was so scared. I thought maybe I had no choice left." Her voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. Jake nodded slowly, understanding her pain without interruption. I know it feels that way, he said softly. But there's always a way forward. You just need the right guidance and support. That's why I'm here. He gestured for her to sit on a nearby bench. Maria did so, her movements hesitant, unsure if she could trust this sudden turn of events. Jake remained standing, giving her room, but his presence was steady, comforting. The world seemed to slow around them as they sat in silence for a few moments, letting the tension of weeks fade just slightly. I can help you get a prosthetic leg, Jake continued. There's a local organization that helps people like you. They provide medical care, rehabilitation, and prosthetics. You'll need patience, but it's safe. You won't have to risk anything. You'll get your life back the right way. Maria's mind swirled. She had read about charities and assistance programs before, but they had always seemed so far away, complicated, or slow. Could it really be that simple? Could someone really help her without asking for something terrible in return? She wanted to hope, but caution still lingered. Why? Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. You don't even know me. Jake shrugged lightly, a humble gesture that made her smile faintly despite her fear. Because no one should have to suffer like that alone, and because sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest to notice.
I saw that you were struggling and I couldn't just walk by. You deserve help, and I can give you a way forward.
Maria felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. She had been ready to risk everything for a prosthetic leg, and now someone was offering it without danger. Her mind raced, thinking of all the possibilities. Could she finally walk again? Could she regain the independence she had lost? The questions tumbled over each other, and for the first time in weeks, she felt excitement mingle with fear, hope mingling with relief. Jake pulled out a small notebook and began explaining the steps. First, we'll get you registered with the organization. They'll assess your needs and schedule your prosthetic fitting. Then, you'll begin rehabilitation, learning how to use the leg safely and confidently. I'll be there with you through every step if you want. You don't have to do this alone. Maria listened intently, absorbing every word. The plan was clear, practical, and safe. It wasn't instant, but it was real. She realized that she had been ready to trade everything for a quick solution, but now she had a path that would give her independence without danger. The thought was almost overwhelming. Okay, she said finally, her voice trembling.
I'll do it.
I'll follow your way. I'll try. Jake nodded, a reassuring smile spreading across his face.
Good. That's all I ask.
One step at a time, Maria. One step at a time. For the first time in weeks, Maria felt a sense of control return. She was no longer a victim of circumstance, no longer trapped by desperation. She had a choice, a safe path forward, and someone to guide her. The relief was almost dizzying, and tears streamed down her face as the weight she had carried began to lift. Over the next few days, Jake helped Maria contact the local charity organization. He explained her situation, arranged transportation, and even accompanied her to her first appointment. Maria marveled at the kindness and efficiency of the people she met. Doctors, nurses, and volunteers treated her with respect, offering encouragement and guidance at every step. She realized that help had been available all along. She had just been too afraid or too desperate to see it. As she began the process of getting fitted for her prosthetic leg, Maria found herself thinking often about Jake. He had arrived at exactly the right moment, a calm presence that had prevented her from making a choice she might have regretted forever. She realized that sometimes help came in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes it took the courage of a stranger to remind you of your own strength. Throughout the rehabilitation process, Jake continued to visit. He shared stories, offered encouragement, and celebrated small victories with her. Each session on the prosthetic leg was a milestone, and each milestone brought her closer to the independence she had once lost. She learned to trust herself again, to walk confidently, and to believe in the kindness of people around her. Maria also began to reflect on her own inner strength. She had survived weeks of fear, hopelessness, and desperation. She had faced choices that tested her courage and morality. And now, with guidance and support, she was learning to reclaim her life step by step. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time she felt that the future held promise rather than fear. By the time Maria could take her first confident steps without assistance, she knew that she had been given a second chance. A chance not just to walk again, but to live with dignity, hope, and purpose. She realized that life had a way of presenting obstacles, but also a way of offering help exactly when it was needed. And sometimes, that help came from the most unexpected places, like a kind cowboy who arrived just in time to save a life. Maria's journey was still ongoing, but the darkness that had weighed on her for so long had lifted. With each step she regained confidence, independence, and a renewed belief in herself. She knew she had the strength to face challenges, the courage to seek help, and the resilience to rebuild her life. And she also knew, deep in her heart, that the kindness of a stranger could change everything. After the first few sessions with the prosthetic leg, Maria began to feel a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in weeks.
Each day brought new challenges, but she also discovered new strengths within herself.
Simple things that once seemed impossible, standing for long periods, walking across uneven ground, even climbing a small set of stairs, became milestones she celebrated quietly, but proudly. The process was not easy. Her leg often felt heavy and awkward, and she struggled to maintain balance. She fell more times than she could count, each tumble leaving her frustrated and exhausted. But with every fall, she grew stronger. The rehabilitation specialists encouraged her to keep going, reminding her that progress was rarely smooth and that persistence was the key. Maria learned to see each failure not as a setback, but as a step toward independence. Jake visited her regularly during this period. At first, his presence was comforting simply because he reminded her that she was not alone. He would check in on her progress, share lighthearted stories to lift her spirits, and offer practical advice for adjusting to the prosthetic. Sometimes he would quietly sit by her side while she practiced walking, providing a steady presence that helped her regain confidence. Maria began to realize that his help went beyond the physical. It was emotional, too. She felt encouraged, supported, and most importantly, believed in. At the same time, Maria began to notice small changes in her daily life. She could navigate her apartment with more ease, cook her own meals, and even manage trips to the market on her own. Each achievement reminded her of how far she had come from the desperate days when she had felt trapped and hopeless. She no longer saw herself solely as a victim of circumstance. She was a woman reclaiming her life step by step. Despite her progress, the journey was not without setbacks. Some days, Maria felt overwhelmed by fatigue or frustration. Her leg would ache, her balance would falter, and doubts would creep back into her mind. She sometimes wondered if she could ever fully adapt, or if she would always feel limited. In these moments, Jake's visits were invaluable. He would remind her to focus on small victories, to celebrate progress rather than dwell on difficulties, and to believe in her own resilience. Through rehabilitation, Maria also learned new techniques for daily living. She practiced navigating stairs, getting in and out of vehicles, and performing household tasks efficiently. Each skill she mastered was a victory, and she began to feel a renewed sense of independence. More importantly, she began to rebuild her self-esteem, which had suffered deeply during the weeks of isolation and desperation. She realized that independence was not only about mobility, it was also about confidence, self-respect, and the ability to rely on herself again. Maria's emotional growth was equally significant. She started keeping a small journal, recording her feelings, progress, and reflections. Writing helped her process the intense emotion she had carried for weeks, from fear and frustration to hope and gratitude. She discovered that by acknowledging her feelings and documenting her journey, she could better understand herself and the resilience she had cultivated. Outside of rehabilitation, Maria slowly began reconnecting with the world around her. She visited friends she had withdrawn from during her darkest days, explaining her situation honestly. Their support was heartwarming, and she realized that her isolation had been as much emotional as physical. Friends who had once taken her independence for granted now offered encouragement, understanding, and even practical assistance when needed. Maria felt a renewed sense of community, realizing that accepting help did not diminish her strength, it enhanced it. Jake remained a constant source of guidance and encouragement throughout this period. He often reminded her that progress was not linear, that patience was essential, and that setbacks were part of the journey. He also encouraged her to explore small pleasures again, like walking through the town square, feeling the sun on her face, and enjoying moments she had long taken for granted. These experiences, while seemingly ordinary, were profoundly meaningful to Maria, reinforcing the idea that life could still be beautiful despite past hardships. One afternoon, while practicing walking along a familiar path in town, Maria felt a surge of emotion. She realized she could move freely, even if cautiously, without assistance. Her steps were confident, her posture upright, and for the first time in months, she felt capable of living life fully again. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about how far she had come. The journey had been difficult, exhausting, and at times frightening, but the sense of accomplishment was immeasurable. Maria also began to envision a future she had once thought impossible. She started setting goals, small at first, like walking to the nearby park or attending a local event, and later, more ambitious goals, like volunteering, pursuing hobbies, and planning a trip she had always dreamed of. Each goal represented a step toward reclaiming her life and building a future independent of her past struggles. Through this period of growth, Maria discovered a strength within herself she had never fully recognized. She realized that resilience was not merely enduring hardships, it was facing them, learning from them, and continuing to move forward despite fear and uncertainty. She had survived weeks of desperation and had chosen the right path when she had the chance, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and determination. Her progress inspired those around her as well. Friends, family, and even casual acquaintances were amazed at the transformation they witnessed. Maria's journey became a quiet example of resilience and determination, showing others that even in the darkest moments, hope and help could appear unexpectedly. As Maria became more independent, she also began to give back. She volunteered at a local community center, sharing her story with others who were facing medical or emotional challenges. She offered guidance, encouragement, and a listening ear, helping them see that setbacks, though difficult, could be overcome with support, patience, and determination. By helping others, Maria found a sense of purpose that added meaning to her own journey. Her relationship with Jake evolved as well. While they had begun as strangers, his consistent support and guidance had created a deep bond of trust and respect. He remained a mentor, friend, and confidant, offering advice and encouragement without ever overstepping boundaries. Maria learned that trust, kindness, and compassion could exist in the world even after moments of fear and desperation, and that genuine connections could be life-changing. By the end of this period, Maria had undergone a remarkable transformation. She had regained her mobility, rebuilt her confidence, and developed a sense of purpose and independence that had once seemed impossible. She no longer defined herself by the accident or the desperation she had felt, but by her resilience, determination, and courage. The prosthetic leg was more than a tool for walking. It was a symbol of her strength and the second chance she had been given. Maria knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she no longer feared them as she once had. She had faced her darkest moments, made difficult choices, and embraced the guidance of those who cared for her. Now, she approached life with confidence, hope, and gratitude, understanding that progress was measured not only in steps taken, but in the courage to keep moving forward. With each step she took, Maria felt the weight of despair lift, replaced by empowerment and optimism. She began to dream again, imagining a future filled with possibility, connection, and achievement. And as she walked through her town, past familiar streets and neighbors who greeted her warmly, she felt a profound sense of belonging, independence, and freedom. Maria's journey was far from over, but she had learned that true strength lay not only in physical ability, but in resilience, hope, and the courage to accept help when it was offered. She realized that life was full of unexpected kindness, that even strangers could change the course of her story, and that determination could transform despair into triumph. Through rehabilitation, support, and her own inner strength, Maria had discovered the power of perseverance. She had reclaimed not only her mobility but her confidence, self-respect, and the ability to embrace life fully. The woman who had once felt trapped, hopeless, and desperate was now a testament to courage, resilience, and the profound impact of compassion and guidance. And so, as she continued to walk forward, Maria understood that her life was no longer defined by her accident or her struggles, but by the choices she made, the support she received, and the strength she found within herself. Every step she took was a step toward independence, fulfillment, and the life she had once feared she would never have. By the time Maria had fully adapted to her prosthetic leg, she felt like a different person. The woman who had once been desperate, isolated, and afraid had grown into someone resilient, confident, and determined. Every step she took reminded her of how far she had come, from the moments of hopelessness to the small victories of standing, walking, and finally moving freely again. The journey had been long and difficult, but each challenge had strengthened her resolve and shaped her into someone who no longer feared the future. Maria had returned to her small apartment, but it no longer felt like a cage. Instead, it was a place of accomplishment, filled with reminders of the hard work and courage that had brought her to this point. Her journal, once a private space for fear and despair, now contained stories of triumph, gratitude, and lessons learned. She read through the entries and smiled, realizing that her darkest moments had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of accepting help when it was offered. With her newfound mobility, Maria began reconnecting with the world in ways she hadn't imagined during her weeks of despair. She returned to the town square, walking confidently among neighbors and friends who greeted her warmly. She visited local shops, attended community events, and even started taking small trips outside the town, enjoying the freedom she had once feared she would never regain. Each outing reminded her that life, though sometimes unfair, could still be beautiful and full of possibility. Maria's relationship with Jake had also deepened. He continued to offer guidance and encouragement, though now more as a friend than a mentor. Together, they celebrated each step of her journey, from her first confident walk to her growing independence. Maria had come to understand that Jake's kindness had been more than just practical support. It had been a reminder of the goodness that still existed in the world, even when life seemed darkest. She was grateful for his presence, and she knew that without him, her path might have taken a much darker turn. As Maria regained her independence, she felt a growing desire to help others. She began volunteering at the local community center, assisting people who were facing medical challenges similar to her own. She shared her story openly, offering hope, guidance, and reassurance to those who felt trapped by circumstances beyond their control. People listened to her words, inspired by her honesty and courage. Maria realized that by giving back, she could transform her own struggles into a source of strength and encouragement for others. One afternoon, while helping a young woman adjust to a prosthetic leg, Maria reflected on her journey. She remembered the desperation she had felt, the dangerous choice she had considered, and the moment Jake had appeared to guide her toward a safer path. The memory filled her with gratitude, and she realized that her life had changed not only because of her determination but because of the kindness and support of others. It was a lesson she carried with her every day. Sometimes help comes in the most unexpected forms, and accepting it does not diminish one's strength, it enhances it. Maria also began setting new personal goals. She started attending workshops to learn new skills, exploring hobbies she had once abandoned, and reconnecting with friends and family she had grown distant from. Each achievement, no matter how small, reinforced her confidence and reminded her that she was capable of shaping her own future. She no longer saw her accident as a limitation, but as a turning point that had pushed her to discover inner strength she had never fully recognized.
Her growing confidence allowed her to embrace life more fully.
She participated in community events, joined local walking groups, and even volunteered to mentor others undergoing rehabilitation. Each activity helped her feel connected, empowered, and purposeful. She realized that independence was not just about walking. It was about living fully, embracing challenges, and contributing to the lives of others. Maria also reflected on the emotional growth she had experienced. She had learned to process fear, accept vulnerability, and find courage in the face of uncertainty. She understood that setbacks were a natural part of life, and that resilience was built through perseverance, not the absence of difficulty. Her journey had taught her empathy, patience, and the importance of seeking support when needed. These lessons became part of her identity, shaping the woman she was becoming. As time passed, Maria began to share her story more widely. She spoke at local gatherings, sharing her experience of loss, desperation, and recovery. Her words resonated with many, offering hope to those facing their own struggles. She emphasized that help could come from unexpected places and that choosing a safe path, even when desperate, was a sign of strength rather than weakness. Her story inspired others to seek support, persevere, and believe in the possibility of a brighter future. Maria's relationship with Jake remained a source of inspiration and stability. He had not only guided her through the practical steps of rehabilitation, but had also modeled kindness, patience, and courage. Maria valued his friendship deeply and often reflected on how one person's willingness to step in at the right moment had changed the course of her life. She realized that life was not just about survival. It was about the connections, guidance, and compassion we receive and give in return. Eventually, Maria began exploring her dreams once more. She thought about traveling, learning new skills, and even starting a small business. Each goal felt achievable because she had already overcome one of the greatest challenges of her life. She understood that setbacks would continue to arise, but she now had the confidence, support, and resilience to face them without fear. Her accident had been life-altering, but it had also revealed a strength and determination she had never fully known. One bright morning, Maria walked through the town square, feeling the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. Children played nearby, and neighbors greeted her warmly. She moved with confidence and grace, her prosthetic leg no longer a limitation but a symbol of her journey, courage, and independence. She felt gratitude for her progress and hope for the future, knowing that she had reclaimed her life through perseverance, guidance, and self-belief. Looking back, Maria realized that her darkest days had taught her the most important lessons. That desperation should never dictate choices, that kindness can appear when least expected, and that resilience and courage can carry us through the most difficult times. She understood that life's challenges were not the end, but opportunities to discover strength, build character, and embrace new possibilities. Maria's journey became a story of hope for her community. People who had known her during her struggles watched her transformation with admiration and inspiration. She had gone from isolation and fear to empowerment and purpose, showing that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, life could be reclaimed with the right guidance, determination, and support. She often reflected on the day Jake appeared. Without him, she might have made a decision she would have regretted forever. Instead, she had chosen a safer path, embraced help, and gradually rebuilt her life. The memory of that moment reminded her that life sometimes offers second chances, and that recognizing them requires courage, trust, and the willingness to step forward even when afraid. Maria's final steps in her journey were not just about walking. They were about living fully, giving back, and embracing a future filled with possibility. She had learned that independence was not just physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. By reclaiming her life, she had transformed her despair into empowerment, her isolation into connection, and her fear into hope. The woman who had once felt she had no choice now stood strong, confident, and hopeful. She had regained her independence, discovered her inner strength, and learned the value of kindness, both given and received. Her story became a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of guidance and compassion. Maria knew that life would continue to have challenges, but she no longer feared them. She had faced her worst moments, made difficult choices wisely, and embraced support when offered. She had turned desperation into determination, weakness into strength, and fear into hope. Every step she took was a celebration of survival, empowerment, and the beauty of second chances. And as she walked forward, Maria understood the true meaning of independence and life itself. It was not only about walking on two legs, but about standing tall in the face of adversity, embracing support when needed, and never losing faith in the possibility of a better tomorrow.